So, because that was the last time, and I just had it in my head and wrote it down at 9:30 for every single thing. So,
See, it's always good to have a good secretary like Tom to take care of us, make
yeah,
sure.
I appreciate it.
However I can help.
Actually, Eric is the one that brought it to my attention first, so.
Calling 211337 GZ, Auto Owners Insurance Company versus JT Towing, doing business as Crova Towing, and Sumter Township Police Department. Appearances, please.
Good morning, Your Honor. Jared Anjeski on behalf of Auto Owners.
Good morning, Your Honor. Thomas Stidham appearing on behalf of the respondent, J&T Towing.
Robert Young, Your Honor, on behalf of Sumter Township.
Keith Eric
Good
Lewis,
morning,
Sumter Township.
Today is the day and time set for hearing on the petitioner's request to determine the reasonableness of the tow fees, storage fees, and the appropriateness of the vehicle in question being deemed abandoned. Have the parties had an opportunity to talk?
Yes, Your Honor. I spoke with Mr. Stidham and both Mr. Young prior to this hearing.
And you're ready to proceed this morning?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I have received briefs from all three parties. And Mr. Andruski, if you would like to proceed with your petition.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just briefly, this is our petition for reasonableness of the fees and whether or not the vehicle was properly deemed abandoned. The evidence will show that the incident occurred on July 25th of 2020, and the vehicles were towed from the scene and subsequently investigated. And the hold was released on August 25th, 2020, according to Chief Luke. And yet, J&T Towing represented until January 7th of 2021 that there was a hold still on that vehicle, even though the at-fault driver's vehicle had been released prior to that. Thus, the storage fees incurred from August 25th, 2020 until January 7th, 2021 were wholly unreasonable. According to J&T, the vehicle was abandoned on January 5th of 2021. However, it'd be impossible for the vehicle to be deemed abandoned when they represent also that the hold was still on the vehicle until January 7th, 2 days later. According to Sumter Township Police Department, the vehicle was deemed abandoned on September 2nd of 2020. That would only be 7 days after the hold was released, but pursuant to MCL 257.252D, it has to be at least 20 days after the hold has been released, and not greater than 30 days. Thus, it would be improperly deemed abandoned under that statute. And for those reasons, Your Honor, the evidence will show that these storage and towing fees were wholly unreasonable under the Michigan Vehicle Code.
Thank you. Was there something else?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Stidham.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. This action obviously rises out of this motorcycle accident. And I know that I heard the petitioner say that they were contesting whether or not it was properly abandoned. I thought it was uncontested that the motorcycle crash that resulted in the accident was, I don't think anyone was contesting that the vehicle itself was properly deemed abandoned by the police department as a result of the accident. Nevertheless, as I stated in our brief, Your Honor, this motion is really the result of auto owners' own failing to properly inquire about the status of the vehicle in order to redeem it. And they further compound their errors, Your Honor, when they come before the court and file their petition, which is 50 days too late. And it's totally untimely. It was filed from the timestamp on March 16th, 2021. And under Noel v. Ritzker, Your Honor, which is 317 Mishap 506, it's J&T's position that the court may not even rule on their request, auto owner's request, to determine the reasonableness and propriety of the abandonment and of the fees. It's simply, in our view, Your Honor, it's way too late and it's frivolous. But moving to the substance of the matter, Your Honor, here J&T will demonstrate to the court, will prove to the court that the towing and storage fees are completely reasonable, that were properly earned in accordance with the other communities, local similar communities, and there was nothing improper by what either J&T did, or for that matter, what the Sumter Township Police Department did. The evidence will demonstrate, Your Honor, that both complied with the law under the applicable operative provision of MCL 257, 252D. There's nothing, what I think the court will hear from its agent or from auto owner's agent is that he failed to inquire properly to redeem the vehicle. And even after auto owners was notified, Your Honor, the court will hear testimony that they still waited nearly 30 days to retrieve the vehicle. So I have 3 witnesses that are here today, Your Honor, not only Mr. Boken and Emily Borton, but also Louis Hussein, all from J&T Towing, that we will present to the court for testimony. And we expect, Your Honor, at the conclusion of all the testimony, we will be asking the court to enter a judgment in favor of J&T and Sumter Township and against the plaintiff, finding that the vehicle was properly deemed abandoned and treated as such, and secondly, that the towing and storage fees were reasonable and proper. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Young.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. I adopt, as I said in the brief, the arguments from J&T Towing, and in that, I think procedurally, as it relates to the matters before the court, the statute that is referenced is controlling, certainly. And you'll hear testimony if the court is interested from Chief Luke, who had limited communication with the insurance company on this, but nevertheless, some communication as it relates to this matter. And you're going to hear testimony that, in effect, what happened was there was not really any personal contact until months after this incident occurred. My understanding is Mr. Luttrell will testify that he called the Township Police Department a number of times. We have records, Your Honor. We not only have records that indicate, from a document standpoint, when those calls were made. There were a total of 2. Both calls were around 10 seconds. And we also have recordings to show the court, or if the court is interested, to indicate that those calls reflected in Mr. Luttrell hanging up before the message was completed. Please understand that as far as Sumter Township is concerned, when we get a vehicle like this, we don't go out and try to determine where the owner is. I mean, we knew in this case it was a fatal, so I guess with all due respect to the circumstances here, we certainly knew what happened. But my point is we don't try to determine now who is the stand-in, the surrogate, the personal representative, or whoever it is that is to take title or to take possession of that vehicle. Also, we don't know who the insurance company is. And even if we did, we're not in a position to start going around and making phone calls to figure this out. The way it works is we are notified by the owner's representative, family, whatever the case may be, or insurance company. And at that point is when the communications are made and a release of the vehicle is made and determined and triggers all of what it is we're talking about. Chief Luke has documents with him to show when matters were turned over to the state and he'll be able to present that to the court. So I guess to end where we're at right now, at least this is the position of Sumter Township. We complied with not only the spirit of the law, but we complied, we think, exactly with what's required of the township under the circumstances. So thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Auto owners, you ready to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to call Mr. Larry Luttrell.
Mr. Luttrell, would you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Sir, you may proceed.
Could you please say your name for the record?
Lawrence Luttrell,
And where are you currently employed at?
Auto Owners Insurance Company.
And what is your position there?
I'm a claims adjuster.
And are you the claims adjuster handling the claim of Mr. Larry Crenshaw?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the facts surrounding the towing and storage of Mr. Crenshaw's motorcycle?
Yes.
And was Mr. Crenshaw involved in a July 25th, 2020 motor vehicle accident?
Yes.
And was he subsequently killed in that accident?
Yes, he was.
And his motorcycle had to be towed from the scene of the accident. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
And did J&T Crova tow the vehicle?
Yes.
And was there a hold placed on the motorcycle?
Yes.
And did you follow up with J&T Crova regarding that hold?
Yes.
And was it on October 15th and October 19th?
And July 28th. And January 7th.
And on those times, did they tell you that there was still a hold on the motorcycle?
Objection leading, Your Honor.
Just in a moment, allow it.
Yes, on July 28th, October 15th, October 19th, and January 7th, I was told that there was a hold placed on the motorcycle, with the exception that on January 7th, JT Crova was wondering what the problem was, so they took it upon themselves to contact Sumter Township, and then they called me back and told me that the hold had been released.
So the first time you would have been told that the hold was released was on January 7th?
Correct.
And did they ever tell you that they did not know the status of the hold?
No, each time that I called, they said the motorcycle was still on hold.
And on January 7th, did you also call Sumter Township Police Department?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Young, what did you say?
I apologize. That was my fault. Forgive me.
No worries, sir. On January 7th, did you also call Sumter?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you spoke with Chief Luke that day, correct?
I did.
And there was a recorded call between you two. Is that accurate?
From what I understand, yes.
And what did he tell you in that phone call?
Chief Luke indicated that the hold had actually been released on, I believe it was July 25th or August 25th. And that he wasn't sure what the status was with JT Crova, and he referred me to JT Crova to talk to them about the storage and towing.
And prior to that January 7th, 2021 phone call, were you ever told that the motorcycle was actually released on August 25th of 2020?
No, I was not.
And you had attempted to call Sumter Township Police Department a couple times. Is that accurate?
Yes, I called and left messages on July 28th, August 7th, and August 13th. I left messages in the Detective Bureau and never received any calls back.
And what phone number did you use for that, to make those calls?
Well, I used two phone numbers. One would be my work phone number, 734-282-7988. And then due to working from home, our connection wasn't the best. So I ended up using my personal cell phone, where I blocked the number because I did not want my personal cell phone being revealed to whomever I was calling.
And the entirety of the time that the vehicle was at G&T Crova, was auto owners charged for towing and storage?
Yes,
And that would have been, was that from July 25th, 2020 until February 1st?
correct.
And the total amount charged to auto owners was at $6,238.50?
Correct.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Stidham.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Luttrell, did you make any other phone? You said that you called from another number which was blocked. Did you ever call, or that was the police department, correct?
Correct.
The phone calls that you testified to today, did you make any attempt to call was that from your personal self, your phone calls to JT Crova, the 4 calls that you testified today? Was that from your personal cell or from your company phone?
It was a combination of both because, again, we've had problems working from home with our connection.
Okay. And who did you speak? Let's go back, first of all, on July 28th. Who did you speak to? Do you know? Did you make any notes of who you spoke to on July 28th?
I do not know who I spoke to at JT Crova.
Okay. And what was the substance of the conversation on July 28th?
I inquired about the status of the motorcycle and was told that it was on hold.
And what
On
about
police hold.
It was on police hold. And did you
Correct.
then call Sumter Township and ask Sumter whether or not the vehicle was on hold?
I called Sumter Township and was sent to the detective bureau to inquire there, and got voicemail and left a voicemail at Sumter Township Detective Bureau.
And who did you leave a voicemail for? Anyone in particular, or just in the general detective mailbox?
Just in the general detective mailbox.
Okay. And your next call to JT Crova on October 15th, again, was that, who did you speak to on that? Did you make notes?
I don't know who I spoke with.
Okay. Was it a male or a female?
I don't recall. I believe it was a female.
And what were you told on October 15th specifically?
That the motorcycle was still on hold.
And what did you do in response to that information? Did you call Sumter Township to verify whether or not that was accurate?
No, I did not.
And why did you call 4 days later back to Crova?
Just to follow up and see if the hold had been lifted.
Okay, what were you told on that day?
That the hold was still on the motorcycle.
And did you then, once you were told that, did you again attempt to verify whether or not that was correct by calling Sumter Township?
No, because I had not received any calls back from them to date.
Have you ever, how long have you been a adjuster, Mr. Luttrell?
7 years.
7 years. And how long have you worked for auto owners?
7 years.
And you've recovered or retrieved, I imagine, thousands of vehicles during those 7-year period, correct? Or a lot of vehicles, rather?
I'm not sure what you mean by recovered.
You've obtained, or on behalf of your client, on behalf of auto owners, correct?
Correct. I wouldn't say there was thousands, but there's quite a few.
There was a lot. So you're
Yes.
familiar, are you familiar, have you ever recovered a vehicle before, or obtained a vehicle before for auto owners from Sumter Township?
I don't believe so. I don't recall if I have.
possible you may, but you just don't recall?
Correct.
Okay. Prior to your calls with Chief Luke, or your call with Chief Luke on January 7th, and let's just back up for a second. You first called Crova or J&T Towing Crova on January 7th, and you spoke with a female. Is that correct?
Correct.
And did she tell you that, or you said that she called Sumter for you to inquire about the vehicle?
I inquired at JT Crova if the vehicle was still on hold, and I was told it was still on hold, and they were concerned about it also. So they took it upon themselves to call Sumter Township, and I don't know who they spoke with, but they found out that it was not on hold, and they called me back and said the hold was released.
And did you then call Sumter Township yourself? That's when you got a hold of Chief Luke?
Correct. That's when I avoided the detective bureau and asked to talk to the chief.
Okay. But the chief didn't tell you that, isn't it true, sir, that the chief didn't tell you that the hold had been, quote unquote, lifted for this vehicle until sometime after the first vehicle, correct? Or the other vehicle involved in the accident? Is that your testimony?
We didn't talk about any other vehicle. We were just talking about the motorcycle. I don't know about the other vehicle being lifted.
Okay. Your Honor, may I have 1 second?
Yes, sir.
Sir, isn't it true that when you contacted, each time that you contacted J&T Crova, you were told by them that you had to contact Sumter Township to inquire whether or not the hold had been lifted?
No, I don't think that was ever discussed.
You were never told that?
No. I would call them, inquire about the status of the hold, and they would tell me that the police hold was still on the vehicle.
Okay, they never referred you to Sumter Township to make a
Not that I
specific
recall.
inquiry about? Not that you recall. It's possible they did, but you just don't recall?
Correct.
And ultimately, sir, you were told on January 7th that the vehicle could be retrieved or picked up. How come it wasn't picked up until February 1st?
I don't know why it wasn't picked up until that time. We scheduled it to be picked up, and we were concerned about the storage and towing fees, and we were determining what we were going to do about them. And that's when we contacted our attorney to see what could be done. And I believe that's what the time lag was. The time our attorney was looking into what could be done with the matter. And eventually it was decided that we would pay the storage and towing fees and then dispute the matter later.
Okay. And isn't it true, sir, that, do you know who Hauler Appraisal is?
I'm sorry.
Haller Appraisal is,
I didn't catch the name, Mr. Stidham. Heather.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. I'm not sure. It's spelled Haller, Haller Appraisal. Do
Oh,
you know who
thank you.
that is, sir?
yes, Haller Appraisal is the appraisal company we use to appraise some of our vehicles when they're damaged.
And had Haller Appraisal ever been sent to J&T Crover prior to January 7th, 2021?
No, because there was a hold on the motorcycle and we couldn't touch it until the hold was released.
But don't you still often have it appraised even though there's a hold on it? You can go and look at the vehicle, correct?
No, that's not correct. You can't look at a vehicle that's on police hold. You can't touch it.
Okay. And But ultimately, who picked the vehicle up for you?
I believe it was Copart Auto Auctions.
Okay. And did you have any conversation on February 1st with anyone at the Sumter Township Police Department about this situation or this particular motorcycle?
I don't believe so.
Did you ask that any fees be waived?
When I originally found out about the fees that were assessed, I talked with JT Crova about it, and then I talked with Chief Luke about it.
And isn't it true that the chief told you that he wasn't in a position to do anything with the storage bill? Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And the chief didn't voice any objection to the fees with you, correct, sir, Mr. Luttrell?
No, he referred me to JT Crova.
Okay. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Young?
Mr. Luttrell, other than referring you to JT regarding the fees, did Chief Luke refer you to JT Towing for any other matters?
Not that I know of.
All right, it's your understanding, isn't it, that the entity that's responsible for issuing the release and making that determination is the Sumter Township Police Department and not JT Towing? Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct.
And so in the process of trying to make a determination as to whether or not there was a release or whether or not you could pick up the motorcycle, or even to get information on the status, the appropriate party to contact would be Sumter Township. Right?
Correct.
It'd be futile to call JT.
Correct.
Wouldn't it be futile to call JT?
Well, I wasn't getting any phone calls back from Sumter Township, so I reverted to JT, realizing that they would be notified when the hold would be lifted. So I began checking with them rather than Sumter Township because I didn't get any calls back from Sumter Township.
So it's your understanding that if Sumter Township, the police department, were to release the hold, that what they would do would be to notify JT Towing? Is that what your understanding is?
I assumed that, yes.
You assume that, but I mean, is that your clear understanding or is that your assumption? I just want to make it clear because we're going to hear from Chief Luke in a minute. Just want to know what you know specifically.
I would have believed that if Sumter Township lifted the hold off the motorcycle, they would notify JT because JT is the holder.
In your mind, that would be the right thing to do.
Correct.
How many times did you contact Sumter Township Police Department?
I called them 3 times.
And all 3 times, well, let me strike that. So some calls were made from your office phone?
Correct.
How many?
I don't know how many calls were made from the office phone or from my cell phone. I just know that I made 3 calls.
If the records would indicate that the Township Police Department received 2 phone calls from the number that you identified as being your office phone, would you have any reason to dispute that?
No.
Each of the times that you called Sumter Township, all 3 times, did you leave a message?
Yes.
So if the recordings that we have reflected that you hung up within 10 seconds of having the connection made, that would not be accurate?
No, because I left a message each time that I called. I left a message in the detective bureau.
So that would not be accurate. Our records would be inaccurate. At least that's your understanding or that's your belief.
That's my understanding and belief, yes.
Now, you understand that JT Towing is not an agent of Sumter Township. In other words, JT Towing does not doesn't speak for Sumter Township in any of these matters. They just towed and stored the vehicle. Is that your understanding?
Correct.
And that our relationship with Sumter Township's relationship with JT Towing is merely contractual in nature from the standpoint that if a situation like this occurs, we contact the towing company. They come, they pick up the vehicle, and it remains in storage until it's retrieved. Right?
I don't know what the process or procedure for Sumter Township is with this, with JT Crova.
Okay, that's fair. We can get that from Chief Luke, and we can also talk to JT, and whatever their understanding is, will be, well, I guess, what was ultimately put on the record. But what I guess I'm saying is that to contact JT Towing to try and determine what the status is of that hold was a futile effort on your part, and you knew it at the time, didn't you, Mr. Luttrell?
No, I assumed that if the police department released the hold on the vehicle, JT Crova would be the first people to know because they're holding the vehicle.
When you spoke to Chief Luke on January the 7th for the first time, did he inform you that this vehicle had been released, or at least in terms of the process taken by the Sumter Township Police Department months before that?
Yes, he informed me that the hold had been released back in August.
Did he give you any specifics or understanding or any background as to how or why that occurred?
I don't recall.
So if you would have been able to make contact with the Sumter Township Police Department months before, you would have found out that that vehicle was in fact released. Fair statement?
Yes.
I have nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Just briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Luttrell, did you rely on JT Crova to accurately represent the status of the hold?
Yes.
And at any point, did they ever tell you, hey, we haven't heard from Sumter Township, we don't know what's going on with the hold?
They just simply told me that the hold was still on the motorcycle. I took it as is and noted to call back at another date.
I have nothing further.
Thank you. Mr. Luttrell, we're done with your testimony. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your next witness?
I would like to call Chief Luke.
Sir, would you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Chief, could you please state your full name for the record?
Chief Eric Luke,
And where are you employed at?
Sumter Township Police Department.
And you're the chief of the police department, correct?
Correct.
And are you familiar with the facts surrounding a July 25th, 2020 motor vehicle accident involving Larry Crenshaw?
I am.
And Mr. Crenshaw was driving a Harley Davidson motorcycle when he was struck, correct?
Correct.
And J&T Crova towed that motorcycle from the scene, correct?
Yes.
And there was a hold placed on that motorcycle by your department, correct?
There was a hold. It could not be released until the Michigan State Police finished their investigation. Correct.
And when did they finish their investigation?
A month later, they let us know the vehicles could be released.
And
August
was that
25th.
Sorry, I cut you off there. That's fine.
August 25th.
And that was the date the hold was taken off, correct?
Keep on talking about a hold. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that.
A hold that the vehicle is being investigated or it can't be released.
A hold is an internal thing for us. We will not submit, we will not allow anybody to retrieve the vehicle from us until that time. But that's a process that occurs in our building, not in J&T.
And was the hold subsequently released on August 25th?
Both vehicles were releasable on August 25th.
And was that communicated to J&T Crova?
That wouldn't be a situation where we would relay that to them. That's a process that occurs in our building, not J&T.
So at any point did Sumter Township Police Department notify J&T that there was no longer a hold on the vehicle?
That, again, that's a process that occurs in my building. In order to have a vehicle release, you have to come to us. We give you a release form that you then take to J&T, which authorizes them to release the vehicle.
And was the Sumter Township Police Department, were they the ones that authorized the removal of the vehicle from the scene of the accident?
Yes,
And the at-fault driver's vehicle was also released on August 25th, 2020. Is that correct?
that vehicle was actually released and was picked up by, I believe, the registered owner on August 25th. Correct.
And you wouldn't just have a hold on one vehicle, would you?
It all depends on the investigation.
And in this investigation, would it be reasonable to have a hold just on the victim's vehicle?
Both vehicles were being held until the investigation was complete. Investigation was complete and both vehicles were releasable. The investigation actually was complete on 8/18, and both vehicles were releasable at that time. So I'm not quite sure what you mean about on one vehicle or the other. They were both the same. In this situation, they were both the same.
Okay. And you spoke to Mr. Larry Luttrell from Auto Owners on January 7th, 2021, correct?
I did.
And that call was recorded?
It was.
Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to play that recording for the court. I'll just share my screen to my audio and play it.
Okay. Any objection, Mr. Stidham?
I do object, Your Honor. I don't think it's, my objection is on the best evidence grounds. We have the chief right here. You can ask him any questions. If he's trying to impeach him with a prior inconsistent statement, I don't know. I guess it would depend also on the purpose for which he's offering it.
Mr. Andruski?
I'll lay a further foundation.
Thank you.
And Chief Luke,
I'm sorry, Mr. Young, Mr. Young, do you want to add anything?
No, I'll leave it to the court. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And Chief Luke, did you tell Mr. Luttrell on that recorded call that, quote, August 25th, that's when the hold was pulled. So obviously you don't hold onto one vehicle, especially the victim's vehicle. Did you state that to Mr. Luttrell?
I could have. It's possible.
So you'd agree with me, you wouldn't keep one hold on one vehicle and then release the other?
In this situation, no, the investigation was complete. And I said that to further my position with him that both vehicles were releasable on that day. And there were two conversations with Mr. Luttrell. I just want to make sure you have both of those.
When was the other conversation?
I had a conversation with him where he claimed that he called us, left messages. That was very short. I told him I would look into it and get back. And there was a second conversation about 20 minutes after that, where I confronted him with what he told me during the initial call and what I had found.
And are you familiar with the Michigan Motor Vehicle Code, section MCL 257.252D?
Not specifically, no.
So are you aware that pursuant to subsection 4 of that statute that the police agency must notify that a vehicle impounded in this situation must first be released by the police agency?
I think that's a process I just explained a couple times to you, yes. We're the ones who release it, not J&T. If that's what your question is.
And as we already discussed, that was Sumter Township Police Department doesn't go out of their way to notify J&T. They wait until someone contacts their office.
The release has to occur in our building before J&T can do anything with the vehicle. So everybody, they have to come here, speak to us, get the release, and then take it to J&T.
And when was the vehicle deemed abandoned by your office?
The vehicle was changed from impounded to abandoned on September 2nd of 2020.
And why was that?
Because we had not heard from any registered owner or insurance company after or prior to that.
And the registered owner at this time had been killed in the accident, correct?
I believe, I'm not quite sure if it was registered to just Mr. Crenshaw or Mr. Crenshaw and his wife, but yes, Mr. Crenshaw was killed.
And what provision of the Michigan Motor Vehicle Code was it deemed abandoned under?
I'm just gonna object, Your Honor, to the extent that it calls for a legal conclusion. I think the chief just said he wasn't familiar with that specific provision of the abandoned vehicle law.
Mr. Andruski?
I'll rephrase. In Chief Luke, in your profession, you have to understand the laws of the state, correct?
Yes,
And that includes the Michigan Motor Vehicle Code, correct?
correct.
And in the police department, they authorize whether vehicles can be towed from scenes of accidents, correct?
Correct.
And that's done pursuant to the Michigan Motor Vehicle Code, correct? And when it's deemed abandoned, it's deemed abandoned pursuant to the Michigan Motor Vehicle Code, correct?
Correct.
And would you know specifically what provision under that motor vehicle code that in this situation, the vehicle was deemed abandoned?
I guess I don't understand your question. Why it was deemed abandoned?
Yes, under what provision would the Michigan Motor Vehicle Code allow this vehicle to be deemed abandoned?
I'm just gonna, Your Honor, if I may just interpose an objection, I'm just gonna object. I thought that the parties weren't, and this is what I read in the plaintiff's brief, that the plaintiff wasn't contesting that the vehicle was abandoned. If I'm mistaken by that, then I apologize. I withdraw my objection, but.
Would you state for the record, I did file a motion to amend to, that was granted at the previous hearing to also include the determination of whether or not the vehicle was abandoned properly.
I stand corrected, Your Honor.
I thought the petition is marked indicating whether the vehicle owned by the petitioner was properly deemed abandoned. Mr. Stidham, does your copy of the petition indicate the same?
I have it right here, Your Honor. No, the one that I have though, Your Honor, may be prior to it's the March 16th one. And so mine's just marked.
When we had the previous hearing, I believed that we were only adding Sumter's name. I did not realize that the petition had been amended until the order amending the case caption and adding the party was filed. Saying all that to say, Mr. Stidham, that I think the abandonment, the vehicle being deemed abandoned did come up, but I thought that was not the petitioner's primary argument.
Very well,
I
Your
think
Honor.
we're clear now.
Yes.
And the abandonment issue goes more towards the timeliness argument by respondent, whether or not it was timely filed, because the notice under the TR 52 form can only be issued if the vehicle was deemed abandoned.
Do you have a question there?
No, I was just standing for.
We're back to your.
And Chief Luke, would you know under what provision of the Michigan Motor Vehicle Code that the vehicle was deemed abandoned on September 2nd of 2020?
Not specifically. It was not retrieved from us. At some point, we have to trigger the TR 52 process to notify the registered owner that they have 20 days to retrieve their vehicle or it will be auctioned off.
And would you be familiar with MCL 257.252D subsection 5?
No, sir, I'm not.
I'm going to try to share my screen with you and I'll show you that provision. And can you see my screen, Chief?
Most of it. Some of it's being taken up by the windows on the right.
Okay. And you see this, the portion I just highlighted?
I do.
And I'll read it for you. Not less than 20 days, but not more than 30 days after a vehicle has been released under subsection 4, the towing agency or custodian shall notify the police agency to enter the vehicle as abandoned. and the police agency shall follow the procedures set forth in section 252A if the impounded vehicle has not been redeemed. Did J&T, the towing agency, ever notify you that the vehicle had not been redeemed?
Yes, they did.
And when was that?
September 2nd.
So on September 2nd, J&T contacted Sumter Township and notified you that the vehicle had not been picked up.
Correct.
And
Through a police storage report that is generated by J&T.
And that would have been after the vehicle had been released, correct?
Well, you say released and retrieved. To me, released means that the vehicle can be retrieved from the owner. So we need to make sure we understand each other on those two words.
Absolutely. Let me back up. So the Sumter Township Police Department was notified by J&T that the vehicle had not been retrieved, correct?
It was on the list provided to us by J&T on September 2nd, along with other vehicles that were still in their lot.
And on that report, did it state that there was still a hold on the vehicle?
It says yes. I don't know what that, this is their internal records. I don't know what triggers them to put yes or no in each one of those.
But at that point, that would have been inaccurate, correct?
I don't know what triggers that. You'd have to ask them.
But that wouldn't align with Sumter Township's police, their records, would it?
I'd have to know what triggers it on their end to give you a proper answer to that.
And you'd agree with me that the statute requires that the vehicle be released before the vehicle can be deemed abandoned under subsection 5.
Again, my definition of release is when we give the release paperwork to the registered owner or a insurance company, and then they go to J&T to retrieve the vehicle. So I'm still confused as your release, use of the word release.
So if the vehicle had not been released, there had been no form taken to J&T Crova, they couldn't notify you that the vehicle had been deemed abandoned pursuant to subsection 5, could they?
We know if a vehicle is abandoned because we know if we release the vehicle or not. J&T has no part of that process. J&T gives us reports every once in a while, but they do not call us on specific vehicles letting us know the status. The status comes from the police department.
But in subsection 5, it states the towing agency or custodian shall notify the police agency to enter the vehicle as abandoned. Is that accurate?
The process for us is that we would already know if the vehicle's been released or not. So we would go ahead and enter as abandoned. We would know that the process starts at our building. So I understand what I'm reading in front of me, yes, but I'm telling you that the process starts in our building.
So the process would be different than what is contained in MCL 257.252D subsection 5.
We already know that the vehicle has not been released. They do not have to physically call here. It's not like a Detroit Police Department with thousands of vehicles. We only have a number of vehicles at any time in their lot.
And have you seen J&T's brief in this matter?
I have not.
So you wouldn't be aware that J&T claims that the vehicle was deemed abandoned on January 5th of 2021?
I don't know where that information came from now. It didn't come from us. We entered it as abandoned on the 2nd of September with SOS. And I have the printout showing that.
And that would have been 8 days after the hold was released.
I don't have a calendar in front of me, but it sounds right.
So that would be less than the 20 days.
Well,
to the state.
the release technically was the MSP completed their investigation and released both vehicles on the 18th of August. And the Kia was retrieved on the 25th of August.
So taking that August 18th date, that would only be 15 days after the hold was released. Is that accurate?
I don't have a calendar in front of me, but if you're counting the days and that's correct, then I would agree with that.
And that's still less than the 20 days pursuant to the statute, correct?
It appears so, yes.
And after Sumter Township Police Department received those reports from J&T, was there any conversation between Sumter Township and J&T regarding those reports?
I don't believe so.
And did Sumter Township Police Department conduct any further investigation on the motorcycle after August 25th?
No.
And as far as you are aware, did Michigan State Police conduct any further investigation after August 25th?
The investigation was waiting on them to complete their investigation, and that's what happened on the 18th of August.
And does Sumter Township Police Department have an agreement or a contract with J&T for towing vehicles?
Yes.
And do you know what the storage rate pursuant to that contract is?
The contract I have was actually from 2007, and it was for $20 a day.
And
Now, I will say this, I've been the chief since 2016. I have not had any updated contract talks with J&T, so I'm not quite sure between 2007 and 2016 if anything changed prior to that.
And according to the Sumter Township Police records, are you aware of any other contracts that updated it since 2007?
Junction asked and answered. The chief just testified that he wasn't aware of anything.
I must have misinterpreted your answer. I thought you said you didn't have any conversations with J&T regarding the updating of contract. But are you stating that overall, according to the records, that you aren't aware of any updates to that contract?
I am not aware of any, no.
And are you aware that J&T Crova charged $30 a day for storage fees in this matter?
I'm not.
And would that be consistent with the contract currently with Sumter Township?
Not the contract from 2007 that I have.
Thank you, Chief. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Stidham.
Thank you, Your Honor. Chief, is it possible that a prior chief had made an agreement with J&T Crova that isn't reflected in the city's records?
Yes, that's quite possible.
And you, I know that Mr. Luttrell brought the bill issue to your doorstep, and you don't specifically, have you specifically reviewed the bill?
No.
It was the towing and storage bill charged in this instance?
I have the numbers, but I haven't looked into, I mean, I had the numbers after the call with him. When this lawsuit first came about, I started looking into actually what the numbers were, but before that, no, I had not.
And I want to just direct your attention, Chief, back to Mr. Luttrell's initial conversation with yourself on that occurred on January 7th. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And during that call, can you just tell the court what happened?
I was notified that he was on our phone. He talked to my assistant, Melissa Paquette. He talked to Detective Saligen, and he wanted to talk to somebody else. So I got on the phone with him. He said that he was with auto owners. He had some questions regarding the motorcycle and when it could be released, and was disputing that he had made several calls to us, left messages, and nobody had gotten back with him. I'm big on making sure we respond to people in a timely manner, so I told him I'd look into it and get back. About 20 minutes later, after I looked into it, is when I called him back, spoke to him, and we got into the gist of his claims that he had called anybody here and left messages at the PD. And we also spoke about the fees. I don't believe he gave me a specific number, but he said they were inflated or that he shouldn't be held accountable for them because he wasn't notified that the vehicle be released. And I think at the end, the conversation ended with there was nothing I could do about that. We did what we were supposed to do.
Right. And did Mr. Luttrell, or what did you find from your internal review prior to calling Mr. Luttrell back about whether or not he had left messages with the police department?
He said he left several messages for the detective bureau. The detective sergeant at that point was John Toth. He's now been promoted, but Detective Sergeant John Toth, and that he had never received a call back from anyone. I then, of course, told him I'd look into it. Our phone system records everything, and I specifically asked him if the calls would have been made from the number he was calling from, his desk phone, and he said yes, 734-282-7988 was the correct number. So in our phone system, I only found 2 calls from that number. The first was on 7/28 of 2020, so 3 days after the crash. And that call lasted a total of 10 seconds and then hung up while our initial greeting was still playing. The second call from there came on August 13th of 2020. And again, it lasted only 9 seconds this time. And he hung up while our initial greeting was still playing. There was no leaving messages for anybody.
Okay.
And then I called him back with that information and we had that second conversation.
And during the second conversation, where he drops this on in your lap, what was your instruction to Mr. Luttrell with respect to the bill? Just that he had to work it out with J&T?
I don't believe I have the recording. I don't remember my exact words, but yes, that we had followed proper procedure and that his dispute, his conversation had to occur with J&T towing.
Okay. And can you just elaborate for the court, please, Chief, your or the department's view of what a hold is versus what a release is? Because counsel asked you some questions about and put up the law regarding a release. And I just want to get a sense of, if you can explain for the court and for the parties, what the difference between a hold and a release.
For us, a hold is when that vehicle cannot be released or pretty much touched for any reason. In this case, the fatal crash, many times they're stored inside. The investigation is still ongoing, so that vehicle has to be looked at by the investigator, whether it's a black box in the vehicle, whether it's brakes, whether it's lights or whatever. So that's the hold, to make sure that that vehicle is held in a state where evidence will not be taken from it. And then the release is when we actually hand over release form to the registered owner, to the insurance company, that allows them to then go to J&T, present that to J&T, and retrieve the vehicle.
Okay. And counsel didn't ask you, Chief, but you would consider this situation to be a traffic or a vehicle that had been involved in a traffic crash. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And counsel didn't ask you, but isn't it true that it's the department's policy that a vehicle that is involved in a traffic crash has to be first released by the department prior to being retrieved or released by the towing company here at JT Crova?
All vehicles have to be released in that process. J&T has no authorization, nor would they, in my experience, release a vehicle without first getting the release form from us.
Okay. And Chief, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but in J&T's exhibits, it's Exhibit B. I don't know if you've ever seen those before. Have you, Chief?
I have not seen either, no.
Okay. I'm just gonna ask you if you know, and you may not know, and that's fine, But Exhibit B is a printout from the Michigan Department of State regarding this particular vehicle. And so I'm not sure where they get their information other than the lien system, but it says the date the vehicle was taken into custody is January 5th, 2021. This is Exhibit B. Is it possible that this particular vehicle was entered into the lien on more than one occasion?
Not that we know of.
Not that you know of? Okay. I have nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Mr. Young?
Briefly, Your Honor, I think most of it's been covered, but just to follow up on some of the questioning, Chief, as it relates to the calls with you and Mr. Luttrell, you indicated that when you went back to check the system, you determined that there were 2 calls made to Sumter Township from that phone number, the 282-7988 number. And one was 10 seconds and one was 9 seconds. And I think you also indicated that you had recordings of those 2 calls.
Correct.
If we listen to the recordings, what we would hear is that it became disconnected or hung up or whatever the case may be prior to the end of the message ending from Sumter Township.
Right, yeah, while it's going through the greeting, the initial greeting from us, yes. Before any extensions are given, it's the initial greeting. Melissa Paquette is talking, saying, "Welcome to Sumter Township Police Department," and going through the first couple seconds of that.
Your discussions with Mr. Luttrell then on the 7th indicated that when you asked him about making these previous calls, he referenced all the calls coming from his office. Was there any discussion about his cell phone or a different phone?
Only during the second conversation I had with him where I confronted him with the fact that our phone system only showed 2 calls made from his desk phone, again on 7/28 and 8/13, and both times he hung up.
All right, let me get this straight. So the first time he calls, or the first conversation you had with him, because I think you indicated you called him back, but he complained that nobody from the township had called him back, that he had been trying to contact the township since around 3 days after the accident, which was in July. He called in July and then August and then January, at least as far as our records show. He complained to you about the fact that no one was calling him back, and your response was to try and determine if in fact there had been a miscue on the part of Sumter Township Police Department, and you wanted to verify that or look into it. And the only way you could do that is to get the phone number.
Correct.
And that's the way you would check and look back. Is that right?
Correct.
And it makes
I also spoke with my detectives to confirm that nothing made through, and yes, they confirmed they never received a call from Mr. Luttrell.
Okay, and the backup to that is we have a system that tracks these calls. Obviously, it's important for the police department to have an accurate reflection of who's calling in and out and the like. But what I'm getting at here is when you had to specifically ask him, in order to find out if he had made calls or when the calls came in, you'd have to know the numbers.
Correct.
And you specifically asked him that were all the calls made from the desk, and his response was what?
I confirmed with him prior to hanging up the first time. I specifically asked him, so all calls would have been made from your desk phone, and he said yes.
You called him back 20 minutes later, you told him what you found, and the story changed?
He then said that some of the calls might have been made from his blocked cell phone number.
Blocked cell phone number. Right. Is it your testimony today that based upon all of the research that you and your office conducted, that as far as Sumter Township Police Department is concerned, we never received a message from Mr. Luttrell?
That's absolutely,
Conversation on January 7th?
absolutely correct.
So before that conversation happened on January 7th, would there be any action that the Sumter Township Police Department would ever take to try and determine who had an interest in a particular vehicle that was in storage?
No, there would not.
You wouldn't call, well, in this case, we know there's a fatal, so you wouldn't try to call the family or whatever to find out what they're going to do with the vehicle. That's not something normally done.
Correct.
You wouldn't normally go out and try to determine who the insurance company is, or even if there is insurance, and if so, who the insurance company is, and if so, who the adjuster was. You wouldn't do that, would you?
No.
You'd wait for them to contact you, because presumably they're the ones that have the interest in the vehicle more so than anybody else. Right?
Correct. Correct.
And I think you testified that response of the township normally under these circumstances is when a vehicle is, has been taken away by JT and stored in storage, so to speak, that the hold, this great weird hold is something that's imposed upon Sumter Township by the investigative agency. It might be Sumter Township if we're investigating, but in this case, it was the Michigan State Police.
True. Yes, correct.
And they told you, do not release that vehicle until we're done.
It's an internal process with the police department, but yes, correct. Please
Right.
don't release it until we're done.
And then on August 25th, they said, we're done, go ahead, do with it as you please, basically.
August 18th.
Okay, so at that point, the vehicle, the motorcycle is free to be released to either the owner of the vehicle or to the insurance company, and if you would have known who that party is or was. Is that right?
Just like we did for the other vehicle, the Kia.
All right, and if we assume that the testimony you're giving us is accurate in terms of what your records and recordings reflect, you wouldn't have known who that insurance company was until January the 7th,
Correct.
2021.
Yes.
Now, there was a question about JT Towing informing the township about what vehicles had not been redeemed, so to speak. And that process would come by the monthly report that JT submits to the township and provides you with a list of whatever vehicles are on there.
I believe it's monthly, correct.
That's about the way it would go.
Yes.
So you get that report every month, and if the vehicles are on there, you know what hasn't been redeemed. And if it's not on there, then apparently it has been redeemed in one form or another. It's pretty simple, isn't it?
It's just a backup to what we already know, correct.
All right. And so based upon that, let me back it up. Did you receive a phone call at all from JT Towing between the date of the accident when the vehicle was towed and January 7th, inquiring or informing you that there was any interest by the insurance company as to when they could pick up this vehicle?
Not to me, no.
That would be something that that didn't normally occur. I mean, normally the interested party would come to the police department directly. Is that normally the process?
It's my experience that J&T would tell them they had to contact the police department, correct.
Right. We don't have an opinion, or Sumter Township doesn't have an opinion, or doesn't have any specific information or opinion as to what the proper storing fees are in this case, and it's pretty much between JT Towing and whoever is required to deal with them. Is that a fair statement?
That's fair, yes.
We don't negotiate a reduction, an increase, a modification, a change, partial payment. We don't negotiate that as a matter of practice, do we?
No.
I have nothing further. Thank you, Anna.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. And Chief, but you do originally had contracted with J&T as to the base price, what should be charged per day, correct?
From what I have from the 2007 agreement, yes.
So there is some form of agreement that sets those prices, correct?
Normally.
And the reports that you received, those are forms provided by J&T.
It's their tracker system.
And on that, it states yes or no, whether or not there's a hold, correct?
There is a column for hold, yes or no, yes.
And if the hold had been released, should it say no on that report for that vehicle?
I don't know their internal process. You'd have to ask J&T.
And
That's not, to my understanding and my experience, that's not a column that we pay much attention to. That's their internal system.
so kind of anticipate the next question. So once Sumter Township receives that information, they don't really do anything about it.
We would take the information, and if it's required for us to do our TR-52 on a vehicle, we would then do a TR-52 abandoned vehicle report. But we already had their information because we released the vehicle in the first place.
But Sumter Township doesn't contact J&T, say like, hey, that's inaccurate, do they?
No.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Thank you. Chief Luke, I have one question for you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Were you ever provided with this blocked cell phone number to check your records to see if there were other calls from Mr. Luttrell?
Was not, but if it was blocked, it wouldn't show up.
Not at all. There's no look around. There's no.
I'm sorry, I take that back. It would have, there would have been a recording, but it wouldn't have shown a number attached to it. He did not supply me any other dates. And
Thank you. We're all set with you. Thank you for your testimony this morning, Chief Luke. Your next witness.
I don't have any more witnesses, Your Honor.
I hate to do this to you all, but I need to take care of some matters that will be very quick. If you need to go for 5 or 10 minutes, you might be safe, but when I say quick, I mean quick, okay? And we'll pick up with Mr. Stidham's first witness. Ma'am with the blue shirt and silver earrings?
Yes, I put
What
my
are you
name
here
in.
for?
I put my name in. It's Kathy Thorne. It just did not show up.
Okay, Ms. Thorne, if you, I have your file here. Give me one moment.
Thank you so much.
I'm in the middle of a much longer case. I'm going to call your case, and there's 3 landlord tenant cases. Mr. Sarter, what are you here for?
This is my next date. My original date was on the 19th. You pushed it back because the lawyer didn't have the discovery packet, Mr. Tim Rather.
If you're here for a criminal matter,
Yeah.
you're in the wrong court, sir.
No, I had you
Is your,
last
is your
time.
name,
Yeah, I had you
is
last
it
week on the
Terrence
19th.
Sarter, sir? Is that how your name appears on your ticket or your case, S-A-R-T-O-R?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm gonna have my secretary run your name and see what judge you're supposed to be with. I have no criminal or misdemeanor matters this morning, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. And for Pallett's Law, are any
Yes.
of these matters going forward this morning?
Well, these are for entry of writ of order of eviction.
That's not answering my question. Are you proceeding in these matters this morning?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Your name for the record, please, in 210716 LT.
Danielle Polliott from Pallett's Law on behalf of the plaintiff Harbor Club.
Your P number, ma'am?
P85046.
Ma'am, have you had any contact with, or has your client had any contact with Marvin Barnes?
No, Your Honor.
There was an indication on your application in order of eviction for indicating that Mr. Barnes had paid $1,150.
Yes, Your Honor.
Has he paid any more since your filing of the application?
No, Your Honor.
And how much is currently owing to your client?
Rents to retain are $2,978.32, costs of $167 for a total of $3,145.32.
And Mr. Barnes is still in possession of the unit?
Yes, Your Honor.
To your knowledge, has he made any application for SARA funds or any relief, any financial support from anyone else?
No.
And the remainder of the contents of the application for eviction remain true at this time?
Yes, Your Honor.
And what's your pleasure, ma'am?
We're requesting for entry of the order of eviction.
This matter was scheduled at 10 a.m. It's now 10:15 by the court's clock. Defendant having failed to appear. The writ will be signed, processed by the civil department. 21071 ALT G&I Harbor Club Property LLC versus John Tasha Anderson.
Danielle Polly on behalf of the plaintiff Harbor Club, P5046.
This was another application for an order of eviction. And ma'am, the reason why these matters were scheduled were because they were beyond the 56 days since entry of judgment. As to Ms. Anderson, there's an indication on the application that no funds have been received from Ms. Anderson towards the balance due and owing on the judgment. Does that remain accurate?
Yes, Your Honor.
And is Ms. Anderson still in possession of the unit?
Yes, Your Honor.
And is your client's intention and desire to go forward with the order of eviction?
Yes, Your Honor.
This matter was scheduled at 10 a.m. It's now 10:16 by the court's clock. Defendant having failed to appear and plaintiff having indicated that the judgment has not been satisfied and the tenant is still in possession of the unit, the order of eviction is being signed. Mr. Sarter, your matter is scheduled at 10:15 tomorrow.
Okay, they sent me the paper and told me it was for today. Okay.
That's okay. It's with me. My criminal doc is tomorrow, and my secretary's indicated you're 10:15.
Okay, not a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is 210-722 LT G&I Harbor Club Property LLC versus Ruby Peoples.
Danielle Polly on behalf of the plaintiff, P85046.
Again, this matter was scheduled for hearing on the application for order of eviction because we are beyond the 56 days since entry of judgment. There is an indication on the application that no money has been received towards the outstanding judgment in this matter. Does that remain true, ma'am?
That does remain true.
And Ms. Peoples remains in possession of the property.
That's correct. I would like to
Do you
note
already-
that we have information that Mr. Peoples, Myrain Peoples, the other defendant on the matter, is seeking Sierra assistance.
Do you know where he is in the process?
I do not, Your Honor.
Based on the plaintiff's assertion that defendant 2 is seeking Sarah assistance, the application for eviction is going to be denied. Ma'am, I'll set a review date in this matter. I'm sorry, you've received no indication as to when he filed his request for assistance?
No, he has informed my client that he was working on the application for Sierra. And we were advised.
How do you wish to proceed at this time?
We would ask for a review date at this time, because if we're able to get the funding, that would be beneficial.
What do you think is a reasonable amount of time?
I would ask for 30 days.
30-day, we'll set this matter for review. Anything else this morning?
That is all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a good day.
Will we receive a date in the mail for the review?
Yes, I'll send the file down to the civil department.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. This is 211054 FC Kathy Ann Thorne versus Aldrin Harold Thorne. Good morning,
Yes, Your
ma'am.
Honor. Yes.
Good morning.
Mr. Thorne, could you turn your video on for me, please?
I'm not sure how to do that. Hold on.
I'm gonna send you a button to push to get it activated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're here this morning on the plaintiff's affidavit and claim and for a small claims matter. Have the parties had an opportunity to speak regarding the issue and dispute?
Yes.
Any resolution?
No.
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Thorne, this is your claim. What's the basis of your claim?
Mr. Thorne received the information on this on March 4th of 2020 and refused to pay his half of the court order.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am,
Yes.
there's an order from another court regarding this matter?
Yes. And when I contacted the Westland Court, and they said that the best thing for me to do would to take it to small claims because it is below the $6,500. So that is what I chose to do.
Ms. Thorne, what I'm asking is you're saying there is already an order from another court regarding the monies listed in your affidavit?
Yes, Your Honor.
And what court is that?
That's the 3rd Judicial District.
Circuit Court?
Yes.
Ma'am, you're in the wrong place. You have to go back to Circuit Court to have the order enforced by the judge or the court that issued that order.
Okay. All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Westland Court just gave me the wrong information.
They can't give you legal advice. Clerks can process paperwork. Inasmuch as this is the wrong court for this matter, your small claims affidavit will be dismissed, okay?
Okay, no, that's
You need
fine.
to pursue the matter in Circuit Court.
Okay, and I could do small claims in Circuit Court also.
Ma'am, you already have an order from that court. You need to go back to whoever issued the order to you in small
Okay.
regarding this money, okay?
Okay, thank you. I do
Thank you, ma'am.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Much. You have a good
I will
afternoon.
do that.
And we will
Okay.
get a notice of dismissal for today in the mail.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and I
Thank
will
you.
pursue it with the 3rd Judicial District. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You both have a good day. Thank you for your patience.
You also, thank you.
Thank you. Back on the record in 211-337-GZ. Mr. Stidham,
Yes, Your Honor.
are you ready with your first witness?
I am. My first witness, Your Honor, the J&T calls Emily Borton.
Ma'am, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You're muted.
I'm sorry about that. I do.
Would you spell your last name for me, please?
It's B-O-R-T-O-N.
Thank you. Mr. Stidham.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Borton. Can you state your name for the record?
Emily Borton.
And what is your, how are you affiliated with J&T Towing?
Dispatcher.
Okay, and as part of your dispatcher duties, do you also maintain the records of J&T Towing?
I do.
Okay, and Ms. Borton, I have some exhibits that were previously presented to the court. I'm going to direct your attention to the J&T Towing's Exhibit A. Do you have that in front of you, the impounded vehicle supplemental report from the Sumter Township Police Department?
Is it the inventory?
It's Exhibit A. Where it
Oh,
says-
yes.
Yes, are you familiar with this document?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell the court what it is? It stands hold, correct?
Correct.
And is this the hold for the motorcycle that we've been discussing today?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to direct your attention to Exhibit C, which is the J&T invoice number 242363, dated 7/25/20. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Borton, as part of your duties, would you, as a dispatcher, would you also receive phone calls from people that would call about inquiring about the status of their vehicle?
Yes.
Did you do that on this occasion with respect to the motorcycle?
Yes.
And can you, this invoice, Exhibit C, is at the bottom of page 1. It's 2 pages, and there's a number of, it says additional invoice notes. Did you make those notes?
Correct.
Yes, you did?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I move to admission of Exhibit C.
Mr. Young,
Objection, Your Honor.
Mr. Andruski,
No objection.
should be
Thank
received.
you, Your Honor. Ms. Borton, when was the first time that auto owners contacted J&T Towing with respect to the motorcycle?
7/28 of 2020.
Okay. And did you yourself have a conversation with the person that called?
Yes.
And on page 2, excuse me, there is a note from 7/28/20. Did you make that note?
Yes.
And can you read that note into the record?
It says auto owners full coverage insurance. Larry from auto owners called regarding bike, advised this is full coverage insurance and would like to pick bike up as soon as the hold is lifted, referred to the Sumter Police Department.
And what does that mean, referred to the Sumter Police Department?
That means that they need to contact the Sumter Police Department regarding the bike or vehicle and getting a vehicle release form.
Okay. And the next entry from auto owners, can you tell us when that occurred?
October 15th of 2020.
And what happened on that date?
Larry from auto owners called about the bike again, and I referred him to the Sumter Police Department.
And when was the next time that auto owners called J&T?
January 7th of 2021.
And what, did you make notes on that date?
Yes, I did.
What do your notes reflect?
Auto owners, insurance, full coverage insurance. Larry called again and referred him to the Sumter Police Department.
And you heard Mr. Luttrell's testimony previously?
Yes.
Is it accurate? So were you the person that he was talking to on January 7th?
Yes.
And is it accurate that you then called the Sumter Township Police Department to inquire about the status of the vehicle?
Yes.
Can you tell the court what occurred on that day, January 7th?
So when Larry from auto owners called on January 7th regarding the motorcycle, I asked him if he's been in contact with the Sumter Police, and I told him that I would reach out to the Sumter Police regarding the hold on the motorcycle.
And you did that, correct?
Yes.
And you heard Mr. Luttrell's testimony that every time he'd spoken to you, you told him that the vehicle is on hold. Is that accurate?
So if something is on hold, we still refer them to the police department. So Sumter Police Department to get the vehicle release form.
Because you wouldn't know one way or another, correct?
Right, correct.
And at some point on January 7th, Sumter Police told you that the vehicle was cleared to be the hold had been lifted and could be released. Is that correct, Ms. Borton?
Yes,
Okay. And you made some notes after, and specifically on page 2, 8, 9, 10, and numbers 11. Are those your notes?
yes.
And what was occurring at this time that you made these notes on numbers 8 and 9 and 10?
Haller Appraisal called, and they were coming to look at the bike for auto owners insurance. Basically the process that the insurance company goes through picking up a vehicle or a bike at that point. It's the normal process. Haler came and looked at the bike or the vehicle, and then Copart called on a 2/1 of 2021 picking up the bike about fees and stuff.
Okay. And did you have a conversation? Your notes reflect that you talked to Melissa at Sumter Police?
Yes, on 2/1 of 2021, Melissa at the Sumter Police waived the release form for Copart to come and get it on the behalf of auto owners.
And did you have any other conversations with Mr. Luttrell after January 7th of 2021?
Maybe on 2/1, because it says she released the bike to auto owners insurance because he was very aggravated over the policy to get the release form. But after that, I don't recall.
Okay. Ms. Borton, I'm going to turn your attention to our Exhibit E, J&T's Exhibit E, which is the police storage report of vehicles in impound. Have you seen these documents before?
Yes,
And who prepares these documents?
I do.
And can you tell the court specifically what are they and what do you do with them?
It's a report that I send over to show that the vehicles that are still current in our impound yard.
And you do this on a monthly basis? Is that correct?
Yes,
And was the Harley Davidson motorcycle listed on each report that you sent to the police department?
yes.
I have nothing further for Ms. Borton, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Young?
Very few. Just so I understand, so you had, if I understand correctly, a conversation with Mr. Luttrell on 7/28/2020, 10/15/2020, and January 7th, 2020.
Yes,
And possibly on February 1st, 2021.
yes.
Do you recall any other communication with Mr. Luttrell or anyone from auto owners? during
No,
that time period?
no.
Yet on February the 1st, 2021, it was your impression that Mr. Luttrell was, quote, very aggravated
Yes,
over the policy to get the release form.
yes,
And his conversations with you were over a 5-month period, whatever that is, 3 times.
yes, correct.
Other than January 7th of 2021, did you call Sumter Township to inquire what the status was, or on the previous 2 times, did you just refer him to Sumter Township?
So the previous 2 times that I spoke to him, I referred him to the Sumter Police Department. So it was on January 7th that I called the Sumter Police.
So the first time that you called to inquire about what the status was of this was January 7th, 2021.
Correct.
I mean, quite frankly, you would have no reason to normally call under any circumstances. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah, I do. I don't call.
I have nothing further. Thanks, Your Honor.
Thank you. Sir,
On January 7th of 2021, did you speak to Chief Luke or someone else in that department?
On January 7th, I talked to Melissa.
And what were you told as to the status of the hold? Were you told that it was released that day, or were you told that it was released some day previously?
They just told me it was lifted.
Did they tell you on what date it was actually lifted on?
No.
And the other vehicle involved in that accident was also towed to your yard, correct?
Yes.
And that was a 2016 Kia, correct?
Yes.
And that 2016 Kia was listed with a case number in regards to why that vehicle was on your yard, correct?
Yes.
And that was case number 20-5335.
Yes.
And that was also the same case number listed for the Harley Davidson, correct?
Yes.
And so J&T was aware that the at-fault vehicle, or the vehicle, the 2016 Kia, was released on August 27th, correct?
I'm sorry, what was your question again?
J&T released the 2016 Kia from their yard, correct?
Yes, because they got a vehicle release form.
And so J&T was aware that one of the vehicles involved in the accident had the hold has already been lifted and there was no further investigation, correct?
I wouldn't know if the hold was lifted on the Harley or on the motorcycle if the Kia was getting picked up.
But they were both listed for the same accident, correct?
Right, and that, yeah, they can be the same accident, but that doesn't mean that the other one can be released at that point because there's still not a vehicle release form.
And did J&T ever follow up on that as to why one vehicle was released for the same case and one wasn't?
No.
And the 2016 Kia, was that only charged $1,308.50 for towing and storage?
I'm not sure.
Who would have that information?
The tracker system.
Oh, just one moment, please. I'll share my screen with you. And can you see my screen currently?
Yes.
And is this the invoice for the 2016 Kia?
Yes.
And on that, they were only charged $1,308.50. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And Your Honor, I move to admit this invoice as an exhibit.
Mr. Stidham?
Again, Your Honor, my objection to the admission would just be relevance to this has no specific relevance to this motorcycle. Subject to, that's my objection.
Mr. Andruski?
Your Honor, it's relevant as it's related to when the Kia was released, whether or not J&T was aware that another vehicle involved in the same accident was released, to show that there would be knowledge as to the vehicles, the holds had been released on the vehicles, as well as the reasonableness of the fees overall. That one vehicle in the same exact accident was only charged $1,300, whereas my client was charged $6,200.
I'm gonna sustain the objection. If there's a different way to get to for you to address the reasonableness of the fees, I don't think this is it.
And the Kia was only charged for storage fees from July 25th through August 27th. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And when you spoke to Mr. Luttrell, did you ever tell him that there was a hold on the vehicle?
I referred him to the Sumter Police Department.
Yes, but at any point during that conversation, did you say there is still a hold on the vehicle?
No.
But then in the report sent to Sumter Township Police Department, you still note on those reports that there is a hold, correct?
Yes.
So you tell Sumter Township that there is still a hold, but then you tell Mr. Luttrell that you just don't know if there's a hold?
Right, because this is for evidence, so it's inside of our system. So a vehicle can still be on hold and they can still get a vehicle release form. That is kind of irrelevant to it. So they can still get a vehicle release form with the vehicle being on hold. It just, yeah, basically what it does is it stops anybody because it's for evidence or anything like that. It stops people from tampering with it, coming in, taking pictures, removing personals, anything like that.
So internally, there's a hold on the vehicle according to your records, correct?
Correct, yes.
But that information was never conveyed to Mr. Luttrell.
Correct.
And what triggers J&T to mark the column hold as Y?
On the toe tag, it's written hold on the toe tag.
And what would trigger it to change that column to N? Or I guess N stands for no and Y stands for yes. Is that correct?
What if a vehicle's on hold?
Yeah, in the column it says Y or N. I just want to make sure we're on the same page that Y equals yes and N equals no.
I'm sorry,
Correct,
Counsel,
yes.
what document are you referencing, if I may? I'm not objecting, I want to be clear.
The report sent by J&T to Sumter Township. I believe it's Exhibit E
Okay.
of your brief. Yes, Exhibit E.
Pam, you can
And-
answer that question.
I'm sorry, yes. So yes or no on the inventory, I'm sorry.
You're okay.
And what triggers it to change it from a Y to an N?
Nothing, to be honest with you.
And are you aware of any agreements with Sumter Township as to the price set for charging, towing, and storage?
Everything is computer generated, so I wouldn't know offhand.
And the storage rate for the Harley-Davidson motorcycle, that was charged at $30 per day, correct?
Yes.
And on there's also a $125 weight fee charge on August 26th. What is that for?
That's on scene waiting. It's a wait time
Where?
on the scene of the accident.
But the accident occurred on July 25th, 2020, correct?
Yes.
And then my client was charged $125 a month and 1 day later. for waiting at the accident scene?
Yes, that's after like a review of the bill.
So that was added on a month and 1 day after the fact?
Yes,
And who made that determination?
I don't recall.
And how long did J&T have to wait at the scene of the accident?
I'm not too sure.
And would you know where, is that $125 like per hour, or how is that calculated?
Normally per hour.
And is it charged $125 per hour or a different rate?
It's computer generated, so I'm not too sure.
And who inputs the data to make it generate that charge?
Dawn,
And what other police departments does J&T have contracts with?
Objection to relevance, Your Honor.
Your response, sir?
Your Honor, in their response brief, they say that the prices and charges of what's charged by J&T is reasonable for the locality.
But that has nothing, I'll sustain the objection. I don't believe that that has anything to do with who they have contracts with. Your question might be, do you have different rates that you charge for different localities?
Fair enough, Your Honor. Could you give me a range of all the lowest and highest prices per daily storage of contracts you might have with other localities in Wayne County?
so like I said, it's computer generated. I don't know who we have contracts with. I can tell you the police department said we do tow for, but I'm not too sure.
Would you know the rates charged by those different agencies?
Again, it's computer generated, so I'm not too sure.
So is this invoice, the one we're discussing, the Harley Davidson, is that the only invoice you have knowledge of?
I don't know what you mean by that.
And earlier, counsel asked you if you had knowledge in regards to the records for J&T, correct?
Yes, he did, but they have to be in front of me to like look at what the records are.
Okay, so the basis of your knowledge is based on reviewing the document and testifying as to that document, correct?
With this, yeah, with this one, yes, sir.
Would you have knowledge
first one.
outside?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Would you have knowledge outside of any other invoices or what's charged by other municipalities?
Yes and no.
What rate charges are you aware of?
Well, I have knowledge of this one because they directly spoke to me. So that's why I know about this one.
Then my question is, do you know of any others, or is this the only one?
This would be the only one.
And at any point did J&T notify Sumter Police Department that the vehicle was abandoned?
I just send an inventory list over.
Was there any other conversation besides that?
No.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Stidham?
I have nothing further from Ms. Borton, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Borton.
Thank
Your
you.
next witness, sir?
Yes, my next witness, Your Honor, J&T calls John Boken.
Mr. Boken, would you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stidham?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Boken. Can you tell us your name and relationship to J&T Corova?
John Bokan, owner.
And Mr. Bokan, how long has J&T towed for Sumter Township Police Department?
40 years.
Is it safe to say, sir, that over the 40 years, the rates have changed?
Yes, sir.
Council references some rates that were charged and with respect to this particular invoice. And I just want to direct your attention to the invoice. First of all, do you have Exhibit C in front of you, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you reviewed this invoice before, Mr. Bokan?
Yes.
And first of all, I want to just ask you, can you tell the court what was done with respect to this particular tow?
Well, it was from an accident where it was a fatal accident. And fatal accidents, they request to have them put inside for till they're done with them. And we leave them inside. We put them in a secure area that has cameras and everything else so nobody can tamper with the evidence. But as far as going out on the scene, I didn't go out on the scene with it.
On this particular one, you weren't on the scene?
No, sir.
Okay. But with respect to the fees, Mr. Bokan, can you just describe for the court what fees J&T Towing earned with respect to the motorcycle?
Well, looking at the invoice, the tow charge was $175. And then there was, which was, there's a $20 fee. That's for, we put it under labor, I would say, but there's a clean disposal bag with all the debris that we pick up on scene. And
well, can I stop you here, Mr. Bokan?
Right.
Let me ask you, is the motorcycle require any special type of tow?
Right, it's on a flatbed, and it takes a process to load them when they're crashed, which involves extra work.
This vehicle you testified was placed inside storage. What was your inside storage rate?
It's $30 a day for motorcycles.
Okay, and does that rate differ than your outside storage rate for Sumter Township?
Yes, sir.
And how does it differ?
It's $10 a day. It's inside storage, and we're preserving the evidence out of the weather.
Right. When you say it's inside storage, so this is physically in your yard on.
It's inside of my building here. My building's 12,000 square foot, and we have a special area that we put whole vehicles.
Okay. And, counsel for the petitioner in their brief attached a letter from Sumter Township to J&T Towing and another company back in 2007 with some specific tow rates. Did those rates ever change from 2000? Or let me ask it this way, sir. Have the tow rates with Sumter Township ever changed from 2007 to currently?
Yes, I talked to the prior chief after we built this facility, and he liked that we could provide inside storage for their special evidence vehicles, and we'd change the rates from what they were before, but we haven't had a rate change in years.
And just to back up for a second, your inside storage rate is $30 a day. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What is your outside storage rate?
20.
20, and that's for Sumter Township.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and what is your general, is there a general tow fee for Sumter Township that you charge?
On a regular vehicle tow,
Yes.
it's $175.
Was there ever a time, sir, when the general tow fee was $95?
Yes, back in, I think, 07 or something.
And you could add on some extra at that time?
Right, yep. And that was just, if they call us out and there was no extras, it was just like for an arrest and tow it in.
Okay, and does the J&T utilize different fees when you're towing a vehicle for Sumter Township Police Department?
I'm not sure what your question is.
Has JT ever had different fees when you tow one of Sumter Township's vehicles? That's my question.
Their own personal equip or vehicles?
Correct.
Yeah, we don't charge them the same as an impound because their stuff is, if it's broke down, they call it's in their yard, we go and pick it up and take it someplace for repair. This impound rate is an emergency rate that we're on call 7/24, and we have to respond, and we're to be to the scene within 20 minutes to take care of the scene and clean it up.
Right. And you heard Ms. Borton testify about your invoice on page 2 and number 3. There was a charge for wait time that was added.
Yes.
Do you know what that is, and can you explain that to the judge?
I'm not really sure. My wife took care of that stuff and she's not here today.
Okay. It's not unusual that
no, if there's things that go on, or if the police department's here and we're helping them with their, to do things on site, that to complete their investigation, that could be where it was added on from. The work that we spent time with them here in the shop.
Mr. Bokan, was there in your experience towing for the Sumter Township Police Department, has it always been Sumter Township's policy that before you can release a vehicle, the owner has to obtain a vehicle release form from the department?
Yes, sir. It's been policy for a lot of years. And they also, it keeps us from getting in trouble and releasing something that somebody didn't want to be released. So they have to go down there and obtain their release form from Sumter Police Department before we can release the vehicle.
Okay, I have nothing further for Mr. Bokan, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Young.
One question, Mr. Bokan, I forgot to ask the earlier witness. The motorcycle that is in question, where is that today?
I have no clue. They picked it up in January or February 1st. Copart picked it up.
All I want to know. Thank you. Nothing further.
Yep.
Thank you. Auto owners?
And the $30 indoor storage rate, is that for all vehicles stored inside your facility?
That's for motorcycles.
And does it differ for other vehicles?
Yes, sir.
And how does it differ?
Well, cars are at $25 a day.
So for motorcycles, even though they're smaller and take up less space, they're charged $5 more?
Oh, you gotta handle them and do all that, you know, get everything in place.
But wasn't there a hold on this motorcycle, correct?
What was that again?
So there was a hold on this motorcycle though, correct?
Right to our knowledge. When they bring them in, they tell us that they're on hold. And so they get put inside for investigation.
So you wouldn't have to, sorry, go ahead.
And we preserve them inside.
So there'd be no need to handle the motorcycle additionally after it comes to your facility, correct?
Unless they want to investigate it or, you know, do things.
But yet you still charge an additional $5 per day just because it's a motorcycle?
Yeah, we put it in a pallet. We take care of it. So we just put it on it, you know.
Is that any different than a vehicle?
I guess not. I don't know where you're going with it.
And you testified at a hearing similar to this on April 6, 2021, correct?
What's that?
You testified at an earlier hearing on April 6, 2021, similar to this, correct?
Yeah, I don't know what that's got to do with this.
And at that hearing, you testified that $25 a day was a reasonable rate, correct?
I'm just going to object to that, Your Honor, is totally irrelevant. That was a different situation. My objection is relevance.
Your Honor, the relevance become known because the vehicle was released, as the court may recall, on January 7th, 2021, the same exact date this vehicle was released, and would be on the property for the same exact period of time.
You're asking about the rates.
Correct. And one was being charged $25 a day for the same time period, and one was being charged $30 a day for the same time period, stored in the same facility.
I will allow it. Your objection's overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And Mr. Boken, at that hearing, you testified that $25 was a reasonable rate, correct?
That was a different police department. And we have different rates.
But earlier, I asked you if you had the same rates, and it was just different between motorcycles and vehicles. So it's also different rates between different departments.
Well, I think you're trying to twist it around on me here.
Well, then clarify it for me, Mr.
Well,
Boken.
The other car that we were in court over that you didn't pick up in a timely fashion, you know, was not my fault either. You know, that was for a different police department. This is the rate I have on my computer for Sumter for motorcycle inside storage.
And that other vehicle that we discussed was also released on January 7th of 2021, correct?
What vehicle is that?
The 2015 Chevrolet Equinox.
Again, Your Honor, I object to relevance. I don't know
This I
what.
will sustain. If we're talking about rates, we can talk about rates, Mr. Andruski, unless you can connect to me what the relevance is of the prior case.
Your Honor, as far as that question, I'm just trying to.
That Equinox was outside storage,
I'm sorry,
sir.
Mr. Bokan, I'm sorry, I'm trying to hear his explanation for the
sorry.
relevance.
The witness said he didn't know what vehicle that was, and so I was just trying to lay a foundation, but I understand the objection. And Mr. Boken, at that hearing, did you testify that the vehicle was actually stored inside? Mr. Boken, can you hear my question?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what you're talking about, the Equinox now? Not
Yeah,
the Harley?
Yeah, the previous hearing.
Which vehicle are you talking about, sir?
At the previous hearing, did you testify that $25 a day was reasonable for indoor storage
Which vehicle?
for the 2015 Equinox?
That was outside storage and inside storage. Because it had been stored inside for a while, then it was moved to outside storage. And outside storage was at $30 a day or 25 a day for outside for Van Buren Police Department.
But didn't you also testify at that hearing that it was $25 a day for indoor storage?
No.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Stidham?
Yes, Your Honor. I have a couple of rebuttal questions. Mr. Bokan, I want to just direct your attention to, do you tow for the Michigan State Police?
Yes, sir.
What is the outdoor storage rate for the Michigan State Police?
It's at $20 a day.
What about the inside storage rate? Do you store vehicles inside for the Michigan State Police?
Yes. And I believe it's 40 without looking at it.
40 for inside storage.
Yes, sir. $40 a day.
Okay, and can you just explain to the court some other communities that are near Sumter that you tow for and provide what their indoor storage rates are?
Belleville is $25 a day outside.
What is it inside?
40.
What about Romulus? Do you tow for Romulus?
Yes, there's storage outside is 20 or 25. 25 and the same 40 on inside.
What
We
about
crash vehicles all the time?
Okay. Do you tow for the Metro Park Authority?
Yes, sir.
What's their inside storage rate for there?
They are the same
The same as
Van Buren, and Romulus. Everything, all the storage other than this was at $40 a day.
okay. So in your view, Mr. Bokan, or your opinion rather, excuse me, your charge or J&T's charge of $30 a day inside storage on this vehicle was in line with other local communities.
Right. Yes,
Other
sir.
departments? Okay, I have nothing further for Mr. Bokan, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bokan, for your testimony this morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Stidham, your next witness.
I just have a few brief questions, Your Honor, for Louis Hussein.
Sir, will you raise your right hand for me? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
That is correct. Yes.
Thank you. Would you spell your first and last name for me, please?
Louay, last name Hussein.
You have to go slower for me. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
L-O-U.
AY.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hussein.
Thank you. Mr. Stidham.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Hussein. Can
Good
you
afternoon.
tell the court your relationship to J&T Towing?
I'm the general manager now, and we partnered up with J&T, my family.
And Mr. Hussein, are you familiar with this particular incident and towing the motorcycle?
Yes, I am.
And can you tell the court whether or not you heard counsel's testimony of Chief Luke, did you not?
I did.
And where counsel suggested to Chief that the tow company, in this case J&T, did not notify the department of the vehicle being released. Did you hear that testimony?
I'm sorry. didn't understand the question. Say that again.
Sure, let me ask it this way. Did J&T Towing properly notify the Sumter Township Police Department of the vehicle being abandoned?
What we do is what her job to do is every 30 days, we generate a report of inventory and we send it out to the different departments, letting them know that these vehicles are physically here. And what occurs sometimes is citizens will get their release form and not go through the whole process of picking up their vehicle. They'll just come get their belongings. So it's just us notifying that the department that this vehicle is still on our lot and it needs, some type of attention.
Okay, and did Mr. Hussein, you heard the testimony of Mr. Luttrell, correct? From Auto?
The auto owners adjuster, yes, sir.
Did you ever talk to Mr. Luttrell?
No, I have not, but I do have experience with auto owners at our other tow company, and
I'm gonna strike. I'm moving to
oh,
strike.
I do apologize for that.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. Did Mr. Luttrell ever ask to speak to a manager or yourself? You never spoke to him at all?
No, he did not. Not that I know of, and I've never knew that there was an issue until we got the court case.
Okay, I have nothing further for Mr. Hussein, Your Honor.
Mr. Young,
No questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
No questions. Your Honor.
Chandruski. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hussein.
Thank you.
Your next witness, Mr. Stidham.
J&T has no further witnesses, Your Honor. We rest.
Thank you. Mr. Young.
No witnesses or additional evidence, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any closing remarks?
Briefly, Your Honor, we respectfully request a refund of at least $5,315 as the towing and storage fees were unreasonable. The holds were released on the vehicles on August 18th of 2020, and the other vehicle involved was picked up on August 27th of 2020. And J&T, based upon that, they logged the same case numbers. They'd be aware that the vehicle holds were released. And as Chief Luke testified, that the hold would be released as to both vehicles and not just one. Thus, it's not reasonable for J&T Crova to maintain that there's a hold on one of the vehicles involved in the accident, and the other one, there is no longer a hold. Also, it's not reasonable for them to maintain that there's a hold on the motorcycle in their internal documents, report that to Sumter Township, but on the other hand, never pass along that information to my client and just claim that they don't know what the status is. Furthermore, based upon this, my client was charged for storage all the way through January 27, 2021, when J&T called the police department and was told about the hold being released. And that is the time period we are requesting the refund from, not the initial month from July 25th through August 25th, or the January 7th through February 1st. It is the time period from August 25th through January 7th. And furthermore, Your Honor, in the alternative, even if J&T accurately represented the vehicle was on police hold, in the alternative, Sumter Township Police Department failed to comply with MCL 257.252D subsection 4, as they failed to reasonably notify J&T that the hold had been released. Furthermore, pursuant to the statute, that the vehicle was improperly deemed abandoned, as it was shorter than the time period required under subsection 5 of MCL 257.252D. And as the testimony showed, that there was no notification that J&T Crova wanted the vehicle to be deemed abandoned. And for all those reasons, we respectfully request a refund of $5,135, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Stidham.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, this action really results from the failure of auto owners adjuster to make a proper inquiry into whether or not the vehicle had been released from hold. We've heard a lot of testimony today from Chief Luke, from Emily Borton, from even Mr. Luttrell. that this situation is very simple. After the accident occurred, Mr. Luttrell made some initial follow-up, initial communications a few days after with J&T. He subsequently made 2 phone calls to the Sumter Township Police Department, in which he hung up. He really made no attempts to follow up with the vehicle, even though he represented to the chief that he did. The chief wasn't able, as he testified, the township rather, was not unable to identify any records of any other phone calls from anyone else, whether or not he blocked his number or not. He simply didn't appear to have left any messages or made any inquiry. And I think the testimony was clear, both from Ms. Borton, from Mr. Bokan, even from Mr. Hussein, that, and from the chief, that not only is the policy of Sumter Township Police Department is to release a vehicle once the hold is removed, but the towing company has no authority to release the vehicle until the vehicle is first released, quote unquote, from Sumter Township. And Chief Luke was clear that in order for that to happen, the person has to come in, and it happens inside the building, he said, and obtain a vehicle release form. And however auto owners chooses to spin it, Your Honor, they simply did not make the necessary inquiry to determine whether or not the vehicle had been released on hold. Ms. Borton established that every time the adjuster called, it's even in her notes, which was kind of impressive to me, that she referred the adjuster to the Sumter Township Police Department. It's simply not the procedure and wrong to accept auto owner's suggestion that either Sumter Township or J&T Crova had to go out and search and find out what specifically was occurring with this vehicle. The fact that the auto owners places great reliance on the fact that this vehicle and another vehicle that was involved in the accident shared the same incident number or case number really is, I submit to the court, that's simply a red herring. It's immaterial to what goes on based on the testimony of Chief Luke, because every vehicle is treated the same. In the midst of his testimony, he testified that sometimes one vehicle may be treated differently than others depending on what is occurring with the specific investigation. And it certainly does not lead to the conclusion, as auto owners is asking this court to accept, that somehow because this other vehicle was released, this vehicle should have been released magically on August 25th, 2020, and everyone should have known about it. Again, I think the testimony from Ms. Borton and Chief Luke established no one knows about it until the last vehicle, the last titled owner of the vehicle does not know about it until it makes the reasonable inquiry with the police department and determines that, yes, the hold has been lifted, and then goes and gets the release form in the building, as the chief said. I think as far as it's certainly the position of J&T Towing, Your Honor, that the police department, Sumter Township Police Department, acted properly. The vehicle is properly deemed abandoned. There does seem to be, it looks like the vehicle was, according to Chief Luke's testimony, entered initially as an A-ban on 9/2 of 2020. Subsequently, according to Exhibit B of the state of Michigan records, it looks like it was again, somehow the state has it that the vehicle was taken into custody on January 5th, which appears to have, we believe, prompted the call from auto owners on January 7th about the status of the vehicle. But that call, as Ms. Borton described, was really the first time that that this gentleman inquired, and I think it was brought out on cross-examination, as to the status of the vehicle in a couple of months. And once Ms. Borton called the police department, the police department notified her that the vehicle had been released from hold. It was available to be retrieved. She turned around and notified Mr. Luttrell. And what did auto owners do? Really nothing, Your Honor. They sat on their hands again for another 30 days. And I hear counsel say they're not seeking that money, but nevertheless, I think it's indicative of what was happening here. Yes, there was some testimony that they sent out an adjuster to look at it, but again, there was very little sporadic contact by auto owners to determine what happened here. With respect to the storage fees, Your Honor, there's been no evidence presented contesting that the towing fee of $175 that was charged by J&T was somehow impermissible or violative of some contract. There just wasn't any testimony to that. Same with respect to the labor. Mr. Bocon highlighted for the court what was required with respect to not only the labor, but Emily Boughton talked about the wait time charge, which was, Mr. Bocon said, billed under miscellaneous as $125. And frankly, Your Honor, the storage charges of $30 a day, I think were established as reasonable. And the court heard testimony from Mr. Bocon both about how the outdoor storage differs from inside storage, obviously, as what specifically is required and why it's done. And then secondly, that the storage was reasonable in accordance or when one compares to other localities or other municipalities or police agencies that Mr. Bocon deals with in the area. Not only from the Michigan State Police, it was less than that, or the storage rate, the inside storage rate was less than the Michigan State Police, less than the city of Romulus. I think he highlighted Van Buren Township and the Metro Park Authority. And I think when there was no contrasting evidence, Your Honor, presented to rebut any of that testimony that the storage fees, the towing fee, or any of the additional fees were anything but reasonable. Excuse me. In fact, the chief said, told Mr. Luttrell that wasn't, even though Mr. Luttrell tried to dump it on the chief's doorstep, Chief Luke's testimony was that the towing and storage fees were really something that he was not going to get involved with, or the department wasn't rather, and had to be addressed with J&T. So I think, Your Honor, when the court looks at the totality of the testimony, J&T has established that the towing and storage fees were reasonable with respect to the towing of and storage of this particular motorcycle. With respect to the propriety, or that it was rather improperly deemed abandoned, that's just pure speculation by auto owners here, Your Honor. And I'm just going to highlight for the court what I believe to be the operative provisions, which are MCL 257-252 D4. And D4, Your Honor, says that a vehicle impounded under this section, which I submit is subsection K, which is a traffic crash, must first be released by the police agency that authorized the removal prior to the towing agency releasing the vehicle to the vehicle's owner. And that's exactly what happened here. You heard Chief Luke testimony, that's exactly the company policy as well. So Sumter Township is following the law, Your Honor, specifically in section 4. As well as with respect to section 5, counsel tried to do a good job of cross-examining Chief Luke and the parties with respect to this specific provision, but I think he misreads it because that provision, Your Honor, requires the towing agency to notify a police agency to enter a vehicle as abandoned, and requires the police agency to follow the procedures under section 252A if the impounded vehicle has not been redeemed. But I think the critical factor here is Chief Luke's testimony. Again, Chief Luke highlighted that this vehicle had already been deemed abandoned on 9/2 of 2020. And subsequent Exhibit B to J&T's brief, Your Honor, is the record from the state of Michigan that shows, again, that the vehicle was taken into custody on January 5th. This particular provision becomes operative if no one has redeemed the vehicle. This is a different situation than what we're focused on here. Sumter Township, or neither J&T nor Sumter Township violated subsection 5 of 257, 252D. Rather, because we had already provided the notice, we provided the proper notification, and Sumter Township was not required to do anything other than it had already released the vehicle under subsection 4 on January 7th. And so J&T complied with subsection 5 because the vehicle had already been released. So there's nothing, there's no violation, I think, that the vehicle was deemed improperly abandoned. Certainly there's been no testimony to establish that the vehicle wasn't properly deemed abandoned by the Sumter Township Police Department, either in September or subsequently thereto in January. I don't believe that that affords the auto owners any relief in that regard. And lastly, Your Honor, I just want to highlight for the court, counsel makes an argument that the storage and towing fees were improper because of a agreement back in 2007. It was a one-page letter. It wasn't even, I don't know, it wasn't introduced, quote unquote. However, Mr. Bocon refuted that testimony when he said that prior to Chief Luke coming on board, that there had been some conversations with the prior chief, or a prior chief rather, about the proper fees, and he allowed J&T to make or to store vehicles inside at that rate. So for all those reasons, Your Honor, I don't believe that, or I believe that, first of all, J&T has met its burden in establishing that the towing and storage rates are reasonable. I believe that J&T has met its burden along with Sumter Township in establishing that the vehicle is properly deemed abandoned. I believe that the evidence shows that the parties properly established or properly followed the procedure, complied with the state law, and this simply resulted, again, not from Sumter Township, not from J&T Towing, but rather from auto owners' failure to properly follow up, make inquiry, and run down whether or not this vehicle had been released and could be released to it back all the way after August of 2020. So we're asking the court, Your Honor, to enter a judgment in favor of J&T Towing in Sumter Township and make those findings that the fees were reasonable and the towing and storage fees were reasonable, and that the vehicle was properly deemed abandoned. And I believe that's MCL 7 257, 252 F, and make those findings in its order. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Young.
Briefly, Your Honor, to consider whether the vehicle was properly abandoned, you heard testimony today of September 2nd, when the information was provided to the Secretary of State. And also you're looking at a document, as Mr. Sedum indicated, in the state of Michigan showing that that as late as January 7th, 2021, notification was also sent. The purpose behind this, as we know, is to allow the owner or interested parties time to redeem a vehicle so that they don't lose this vehicle for some minor amount of money that's outstanding as it relates to a tow or a storage expense. Purpose for the question I had regarding where the motorcycle was today, it was pointed out that the motorcycle was picked up on January the 7th or thereabouts. Maybe I guess it's after that, but anyway, subsequent to January 7th, after auto owners was notified either by the phone call to J&T or by their client or the owner of the vehicle, the widow of the owner, subsequent to the state sending out notification. We don't know exactly how that happened, but in any event, there's no damage done at all as to abandonment of this vehicle because it ended up in the hands of the insurance company. And they had a ton of time. We're talking about from August through January 7th. So if you're going to count days this way and that way and up and down, the bottom line to all of this is there was plenty of time to take possession of this vehicle. There's no injury, no damage, no reason to get caught up in the minutia of those sections that are being referenced. As it relates to the matters at hand, we have to, in order to find that somehow Sumter Township was culpable in this in any way, we'd have to come to the conclusion that either Chief Luke was lying when it looked at the information, when he went back and checked the phone calls and the like, or our system had broken down. And it's consistent, I think, with the conversations between auto owners and J&T and the township. You heard testimony that the first phone call that J&T had with auto owners was on or about July the 28th. That was the first call that J&T had received. Well, coincidentally, on July the 28th, 2020, that's the first time that Sumter Township received the call. And as indicated by Chief Luke, the records we have, the recordings that we have indicate that the caller was on the phone approximately 10 seconds, did not leave a message. In fact, didn't wait long enough to even get through the invitation message to determine what and where and when to go. The second call from auto owners to JT was in October. So they're referred to Sumter Township on the 28th. They did call Sumter Township on the 28th. The next time they called J&T is on October 15th. We, being the township, have no record of receiving any phone call at all until the January 7th after that date. Now, here's what's interesting. Auto owners calls the township on 7/28 as indicated, and also calls the township on August the 13th. So they reached out twice, called from the same phone. We have no record that any notification or message was left, unless you think, as I stated earlier, I guess it would be the only way to conclude that. And when the adjuster was confronted by that or with that by Chief Luke on January 7th, what was the response? The first conversation he had, he told Chief Luke that he was upset, whatever the case may be, but aggravated maybe, using the same language that he had referenced to J&T, that nobody was getting back to him. And Chief Luke said, let me look into it. Give me the phone number that you call. I can go back into my system and check. Did you make all your calls from your desk? His recollection is, and the statements were yes. He goes back, he takes a look, he finds 2 calls on the 2 dates I just referenced, and no message being left. He calls him back 20 minutes later, he confronts him with this, and then the adjuster changes his mind. He said, well, it might have been from my home, or it might have been from some blocked cell phone. I leave that to the court to make its credible determination. But understand, all of this being the case, understand, Your Honor, if you will, that the process is Sumter Township does not go out and try to find out who is entitled to this vehicle. They wait until either the owner, the representative of the owner, the insurance company, or somebody like that comes to the township, makes claim on the vehicle. At that point, the determination is made as whether or not there's a hold, if the hold remains or not. This is not magical. I mean, there's not a major pronouncement that the hold has been taken off. That if the vehicle is not still being held by whoever the investigative agency is, could have been Sumter Township. In this case, it was the state police. If there's no hold, then what happens is Sumter Township makes the determination as to the person standing in front of them if that is the proper party to receive custody of the vehicle. You don't just give it to anybody that comes in. There has to be a determination. The determination is not thrusted upon J&T. They're just a towing company and the storage company. They're looking for a form signed from Sumter Township that says, turn the vehicle over to so-and-so, it's been released. That's what we're waiting for. That didn't happen until January 7th. We agree with that. There's no dispute as to that. But the reason it didn't happen is because nobody ever presented themselves in that way. Nobody ever contacted or at least left a message with Sumter Township in that form or another. The only way that you can lay that blame on us is if for somehow we did not affirmatively go out there with an investigator or a detective and try to find out who it is that we're supposed to contact or agree with. That's just the way it works. I mean, it's something different than that. We would try to employ that effort. So I'm going to leave it to the court to determine the reasonableness of the fees. We've had no problems with JT at all over the years. I didn't realize it's been 40 years. That's longer than I've been there. So that says something to me as to the services that have been provided. But based upon the evidence, based upon the arguments of Mr. Steidem and the testimony of Mr. Luke, the township would ask that plaintiff's complaint be dismissed and the parties found to be not responsible. I'm referencing the defendant. So thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any last words on behalf of auto owners?
Yes, Your Honor. It's not reasonable that the entity that can place a hold on the vehicle communicates that to J&T to have the hold placed on it. But then when it has information that the hold has been released, it withholds that. It does not communicate that to J&T. That's wholly unreasonable. And as far as the statute regarding what Mr. Stidham pointed out, he's 100% accurate that the towing agency shall notify the police agency. So one of two things must be true. So on January 5th, when J&T claims that they could deem the vehicle abandoned, they must have been aware that the hold has been released as of that date. Otherwise, if the abandonment date of September 2nd, 2020 was accurate, then J&T must have been aware of the release back then. Because as both attorneys pointed out, the towing agency shall notify the police agency to enter it as abandoned. And the statute's clear that it's the towing agency, J&T, that has to notify them to have it deemed abandoned. And that they can only notify them if the vehicle has been released. So either the September 2nd abandonment date is inaccurate or the January 5th date is inaccurate. Both can't be true. And because of that, Your Honor, if you look at the totality of the circumstances of this incident, the storage fees are unreasonable. That one vehicle, was there much longer. The victim's vehicle, he was deceased. And if you look at the circumstances, it's wholly unreasonable. And lastly, Your Honor, as far as the notice date and the timeliness, there's been no evidence whatsoever that the notice was actually sent to anybody and who received that notice. The notice itself was not admitted into evidence, and therefore the timeliness issue is not an issue. Thank you, Your Honor.
The court has considered this matter in its totality, as you indicated, and did note that no one, neither the petitioner nor either respondent, provided a copy of the notice that would have been sent to the interested parties, which addresses, at least for the court, Mr. Stidham's argument that the plaintiff's petition was untimely, which is why the court entertained the number of witnesses it entertained this morning. Of concern is auto owners' seeming lack of, follow up and follow through to determine the status of the vehicle. The court did review all of the briefs that were submitted at the time they were submitted, reviewed all of the attachments, exhibits in their entirety when they were received, and again yesterday. And what is missing is Mr. Latrell taking reasonable, ordinary steps to follow up on this vehicle. If you're telling Chief Luke that you call from this number and Chief Luke searches and doesn't find it, I would think that the second number would come up, which was my question to Chief Luke about searching for this other cell phone or block number or whatever, and Chief said he wouldn't have that information. So I'd be looking for the petitioner to submit phone records showing that this alternate phone number was used on this day for this period of time, and as a means to support the allegation that voicemails were left and not responded to. That's more of an aside than anything else, and I'll cut right to the chase. These tow cases do not come up often, so when they do, I do pull the statutes and review everything in its entirety. For that reason, court will find that pursuant to MCL 257.252F3A and D, that Sumter Township Police Department acted reasonably and followed all applicable statutes, and that the fees, storage fees and towing fees charged by J&T were reasonable. For that reason, the ruling will be in favor of Sumter Township and J&T. There will be no refund to auto owners. Anything else on behalf of petitioner?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Anything else on behalf of respondent J&T?
No, Your Honor. My only question is who prepares the order, and if the court wants the parties to prepare it or the court prepares.
Mr. Stidham, it sounds like you're volunteering, so if you would prepare it and submit it to the civil department, I'd appreciate it.
I will do that, Your Honor.
Anything on behalf of Sumter Township, Mr. Young?
No, nothing further. Thank you.
And Tom, if you just want to send me, we'll take care of the two orders. We can talk about that and we'll get it taken care of.
Yeah, we'll do. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.